So, welcome everybody here at the Southbank Centre in London or via the live stream. Welcome to this special celebration of poetry featuring readings from the new anthology Versus Versus, 100 poems by deaf, disabled and neurodivergent poets, which was published by Blood Axe in May this year. I'm Rachael Boast, a poet published by Picador and editor of the anthology, and I'm the host for today's event, a global CRIP poetry celebration. Versus Versus brings together poets from across the international arena, from emerging voices to world-renowned authors, building on the work of decades of disability justice advocacy. This timely anthology offers a poetry of assertiveness and immense vitality. Versus Versus has been supported by the Royal Society of Literature through their 2023 Literature Matters Awards. Our very special guests today are Lisa Kelly, Khairani and Daniel Sluman. We'll also hear from 6 other poets from around the world via exclusive videos, mostly supplied by the poets. We're very grateful to them and to Pete Hebden at Blood Axe Books for all his work editing these videos. The event will finish with a Q&A from the audience. A few words of thanks before I introduce our poets. Firstly, huge thanks to Neil Astley and all the team at Blood Axe Books for their dedication to this project. I couldn't have asked for a more enthusiastic publisher. Thanks to all our fantastic anthology poets and translators, to the team at the Southbank Centre for supporting the anthology and for hosting us, to our BSL interpreters, Vanessa Brandt and Susie Evans, and to Claire Hill, our speech-to-text interpreter. This anthology takes its title from a phrase found in the work of Brooklyn-born artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. The title was chosen for its vitality and assertiveness, how it playfully repeats itself, relishing in paradox but ultimately going beyond, transcending the pitching of one thing against another in favour of a bringing together. That the opposite of being versus or against something is being affirming or perhaps being together in concurrence is a good way of describing the kind of space this book intends to create. The cover features a painting by Siberian Gulag survivor, the Polish artist Julian Stanczek, titled Concurrent Colours. Versus Versus was edited by me alongside an advisory and advocacy panel, Khairani, Chisom Okafor and Daniel Sluman. All of us will be performing together at Stanza International Poetry Festival in St Andrews, Scotland, on the 15th of March next year. I'm grateful to the panel for bringing their knowledge, expertise and creativity to bear on this project, and extend my heartfelt thanks for their contributions, support encouragement, and friendship. So now let's welcome the poets. Lisa Kelly is a poet, editor, and educator based in London. She has single-sided deafness and is half Danish. Her second collection, The House of the Interpreter, published by Carcanet, is a Poetry Book Society Summer 2023 recommendation. Her first collection, A Map Towards Fluency, also from Carcanet, was shortlisted for the Michael Murphy Memorial Poetry Prize 2021. She co-edited the anthology What Meets the Eye? The Deaf Perspective, Arachne Press. She is chair of Magma Poetry. Poet, fabulist, and librettist Karthika Nair was born with RDEB inversa, a rare chronic disorder of the skin and mucous membranes. Even minor friction can result in erosions or blisters resembling third-degree burns. When not combating triffids, she can usually be found around dance studios. Sometimes that results in books, The Honey Hunter for Akram Khan's Desh, sometimes in dance theatre productions with colleagues. Urgidese Thakore's Rua, Carlos Horn's Guerra's Mariposa, sometimes all of the above, the award-winning Until the Lions. Daniel Sluman is a 38-year-old poet and disability rights activist. He co-edited the first major UK poetry anthology, disability poetry anthology, Stares and Whispers, D-Deaf and Disabled Poets Write Back, and has published 3 poetry collections with 9 Arches Press. His most recent collection, Single Window, was released in September 2021 and was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize. Pain Songs is due from 9 Arches Press in summer 2026. Please give a very warm welcome to our first reader, Lisa Kelly.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So my first poem, it speaks to the invisibility of some disabilities and comments that have been made to myself, such as, "You don't look deaf." The percussionist in here is the well-known, celebrated Evelyn Glennie, and this did come out of an anecdote, but also thinking about Beethoven, who most of you know, he was deaf towards the end of his life. Blackbird and Beethoven. Blackbird, you are the Beethoven of songbirds, but when I hear this, the metaphor summons his bust, and I can't recall your call. How many musicians, Blackbird, are deaf, like the percussionist who taught herself to hear with parts of her body other than her ears, who performs barefoot to feel the music better? If I'd known more about vibrations, Blackbird, how we hear with our hands with special nerve cells, known that hearing, Blackbird, is an audio tactile experience with both senses tuned to environmental oscillations, I could have countered his anecdote. The conductor who claimed the percussionist was fake because she looked round when he entered her dressing room. Blackbird, I would have sung out your chink, chink warning call. When I see you in the ivy, blackbird, I think of the 13 ways of looking at you and how you are a sign as well as a song. Blackbird, you came before and after Beethoven. Your shaped phrases and motifs recorded in his pocket notebook. You sing the opening to the rondo of his violin concerto. I see him, Blackbird, as his housekeeper saw him. Pencil in mouth, a yellow beak, touching the other end to the soundboard of a piano to feel the vibration of your song. Blackbird, as he hits the notes harder, as the piano starts to fall apart. Will the fake musicians turn round? So this next poem, I did some research on a project with the Science Museum, and they had a hearing trumpet, an ear trumpet from the Victorian period, which was huge thing covered in black lace. And this poem speaks to the fact that sign language was banned at the 1880 Milan Conference. Alexander Graham Bell, known for inventing the telephone, had a deaf wife, but he infamously voted to ban sign language, so it was no longer taught to the deaf. They were actually forced to sit on their hands sometimes. It was very, very oppressive, very detrimental, as you can imagine. And oralism became the norm within deaf schools. So this poem, the first stanza is in the voice of a man, perhaps taken his lead from Alexander Graham Bell, a bully, and in the second stanza it's in the voice of his wife, who is deaf. Ear trumpet, possibly used during a period of mourning, Europe 1850 to 1910. 1. In life, she listened to me, or at least tried. Out of kindness, I raised my voice to make her understand. Now I have died. My dumb widow must mourn. My choice of ear trumpet will be held to her deaf ear with its ornate black lace collar and bow. I warned on my deathbed, nothing to fear if you occupy your hand with this gift I bestow. She paled when I raised the spectre of the workhouse, reminded the sweet simpleton of the Institute for the Deaf. Speech is a divine spark. My mute grey mouse must listen for the ghost of her better half. 2. Today I stand naked as a sylph dressed in air. He is under the ground and I float above his grave. I frolic in front of a glass with the trumpet to my ear. Its black lace bow looks dandy. This I will save, rip it from its hard shaft and pin it to my curls. The black lace collar will be food for the moths. Look now at this denuded amplifying cone, its bare shell. Let me fill it with cream to spill on mourning cloth, or plant it in the heap of fresh earth that covers his bones. Cut a single white trumpet flower to place in its O. It will bind him to his voice as the north wind groans. My hands are free to sign in their natural flow. So I've been learning sign language for some years, and it was during lockdown in particular, when I was going on solitary walks, that I really started thinking about different ways of communication. And I was thinking in particular about the wood wide web and how fungi communicate through the mycorrhizal network with the plants, the swapping of nutrients in this lovely sort of mutualistic relationship. And it made me start thinking about my own deafness, and sort of thinking how it has actually been a very creative and positive force for me. If my deaf ear were a mushroom, it would not be a jelly ear, only seen in winter and spring, growing on hardwood, mainly dead elder trees. It would be seen all year round, poking out from straggly grass. It would not be a flea's ear, small with a dirty orange upper surface and a tiny stem that becomes increasingly wrinkled with age. It would grow with age and under stress flame red. It would not be a toad's ear found on a forest trail, blending in with bark chippings, split down the shorter side. It would be found on a silent path, overlooked, split between worlds. It would not be a hare's ear, yellow with a pinkish tinge, gathered in small groups in woods, most often with beech trees. It would be solitary within an urban environment. It would not be a veined ear, funnel-shaped on soil and debris, edibility unknown and with conservation action needed. It would be delectable and mistaken for more common species. It would not be a moss ear, growing on living trees facing downwards, nestled in moss, fingernail width and delicate. It would face outwards, finely balanced, attuned to life's vibrations. It would not be a silver ear, commercially cultivated for cuisine, cures and cosmetics, tasteless but valued for its gelatinous texture. It would be valued for signing the way to alternate reality. And I'm really pleased to say, since the passing of the BSL Act in 2022, when British Sign Language became recognised in the UK as a language, an official language, there's been a lot more inclusion. There's still a lot more to do in terms of including deaf people. And one of the areas where work is being done is within the environment and the environmental crisis. So a group of deaf scientists have got together to create new signs to be more inclusive to the children that they're teaching. And it's really interesting. You can go and look up some of these signs. But one sign that really appealed to me was photosynthesis, because normally you'd have to fingerspell, and fingerspelling photosynthesis takes a long time. I'm not even going to do it here. Yes. But the actual sign is, it's a leaf. Your hand is the leaf. This is the sun. The sun's rays go down, are absorbed by the leaf. It's created into new energy and the plant grows. A new sign for photosynthesis. Leaf of my left palm, burning under hot rays of my sunlit right hand, energy absorbed, gathering fingers of light for this palm leaf to convert into food. The sugar kiss of twisting fingers feed my mouth, rewilding language, signs of science for progress, inclusion. I have much to transfigure. My palm crisscrossed with creases, shriveled fingers, fronds curling by degrees, curve of the heartline, a deep scar. The palm reader tells of temperatures where enzymes fail, hearts of palm, ball in flailing fists. I'll just finish with a poem, and thank you so much for your attention. It's really appreciated. This final poem is, I do spend a lot of time walking, and I find it is a place of solace for a lot of us, and a place where I can can think and reflect. In the Green Chapel. And there are days when we are ghosting ourselves, each step in the forest an evasion, our feet, our leaf mould, our torsos toppled. The crows call this, the wren trills this, and the woodpecker hammers it home. But remember the sound of rain on leaves, how we crouched against the trunk, not for shelter, but to better hear each drop echo each heartbeat, how life vibrated under a green acoustic umbrella. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm now going to introduce the first three poets from the first set of video contributions. First of all, we'll experience Levent Beskardes' poem. Levent is a multidisciplinary deaf artist who creates poems in French Sign Language and Turkish. He was born in Turkey and has lived in France since 1980. A poet, actor, director, and visual artist, he's performed at the International Visual Theatre in Paris and has been a featured performer in festivals around the world. He has appeared in a number of films, including J'avancerai vers toi avec les yeux d'une sourde, 2015. In 2010, he won the honorary prize of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. Levent's new book, Signez-moi qui tu m'aimes, Sign That You Love Me, was published in 2024 by Edition Bruno Duté. Hàn Mặc Tử was a modernist poet who founded the Chaos Loin, or Mad Dien school of poetry after contracting leprosy. His work contributed greatly to the revitalization of classical verse with French influence. Dès son visa, here in Visa Hamlet, 1938, is considered to be a masterpiece and an outstanding work of modern Vietnamese poetry. Around the time of writing, Hàn Mặc Tử was in intense pain, both physically and mentally. Andy Jackson is a disabled poet, essayist, creative writing teacher at the University of Melbourne and a patron of Writers Victoria. His latest poetry collection is Human Looking, which won the ALS Gold Medal and the Prime Minister's Literary Award for Poetry. Andy is a co-editor of Raging Grace, Australian Writers Speak Out on Disability, published by Puncher and Whatman in 2024, an anthology of collaborative poems and essays. He writes and rests on Jija Wurrung country.
everyone, my name is Anh. I'm a writer from Vietnam. Today, I'd like to share with you a poem by one of Vietnam's most remarkable poet, Hàn Mặc Tử. Hàn Mặc Tử was a pioneering voice in modern Vietnamese poetry. His life was tragically cut short by leprosy, an illness he contracted at just 24 years old. Facing unbearable pain and isolation, he found solace and transcendence through his poetry. One of his most famous poems, Đây Thôn Vĩ Dạ, is a masterpiece born from longing and memory. It was written in 1938 during his painful struggle with leprosy. The poem is often interpreted as an expression of his yearning for life, for beauty and human connections. And his writing style in this poem blends dreamlike beauty with the aching sadness of a man reaching out for something forever beyond his grasp. And now I want to read to you my translations of the poem here in Vĩ Dạ Hamlet. Won't you return to Vĩ Hamlet, where the sun shines through rows of palms, in rich gardens as green as jade, and bamboo groves that shield a face. Wind parts clouds, each goes their way. Water grows blue while cornflowers sway. Whose boat docked there just by the moon will reach home as the night ends soon. Dream of a faraway passerby, whose shirt's too white for one grabs to keep. When the fog thickens, blurring one sight, who knows whose love's still running deep? So thank you so much for listening. As the translator of this poem, I want to bring Vietnamese literature like this to a global audience, preserving the emotional depth and complexities of the original while making it accessible to readers everywhere. And I think poetry has the power to connect us beyond languages and borders, and I do believe that Hàn Mặc Tử work is a testament to that. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Rachael for including my translations here in Vĩ Dạ Hamlet in this anthology, Verses, published by Blood X Books. It's an incredible honor to have my work featured alongside so many talented voices. So be sure to check out the anthology. Thank you and goodbye.
Hi, my name's Andy Jackson. I'm an Australian poet and I live in the Central Goldfields area in Victoria. It's also the land of the Djadjawurrung people whose sovereignty is ongoing on this land, and I pay respects to the elders. The poem I'm going to read for you from the wonderful anthology Verses, which I'm so happy to be part of. Such a fantastic community of poets. My poem is called Song Not For You, and it's a response to Rilke's poem, which is usually translated as The Song of the Dwarf. Not surprisingly, it's a poem of tremendous othering and also very little reality. So I wanted to bring that reality back and to speak back to Rilke and to all the othering that happens in the current era. The voice in this poem is not mine, but it is certainly a voice that whose defiance I share and whose privacy I share as well. Song Not For You. Crooked blood, stunted hands, crippled, out of place. Uncanny how small thoughts can be, while I'm incomparable. Only a dwarf because the so-called average person is taller. You ought to just walk on by, but don't. Ever thought how inflated you must look from this height? When I walk or shop, I'm inspiring, it seems. Fantastic to see you getting out, you say, as you imagine waking up in my body. The courage you'd need not to kill yourself is that. How do you live with that? That's me, wandering back, distractedly eating, wow, a sandwich. In my home, I've made it so I come face to face with the cupboards and oven belonging as we all want it. I sleep in my bed, sometimes alone. At work, my cubicle's longer and wider than yours. True, this isn't much of a song, but then it never was meant for you.
Fantastic. It's a real treat to have be hearing from some of our international contributors. I just want to thank them all again. Levent Beskardes, poems translated from the French sign language by Stephanie Papa. Okay, so before Karthika reads, we've got a special treat as well today. Karthika is going to read a poem in the anthology by the late G.N. Saibaba. So to preface that, I will just read his bio note. G.N. Saibaba was an Indian scholar, writer, and human rights activist. He was born in Andhra Pradesh and used a wheelchair since the age of 5 due to polio. An assistant professor at Ramlal Anand College at Delhi University, Saibaba was wrongfully imprisoned in 2014 as part of the state's alleged crackdown on Maoist activity. Despite repeated acquittals by regional courts in the country and pleas from international humanitarian organizations, he was denied bail and medical care and wasn't released until 2024. He died 7 months later, another fatal casualty of state-orchestrated injustice.
Thank you, Rachel. In an ideal world, Professor Saibaba could have read this poem himself. In an ideal world, a supposedly democratic nation state shouldn't have felt the need to imprison one of its finest minds for 8.5 of his last 10 years of life. And in an ideal world, the law and order forces who came to arrest him wouldn't have thrown him into the van, removing him from his wheelchair and paralyzing him further. But it's not an ideal world. And so I'm going to be reading Professor G.N. Saibaba's poem, A Sparrow in My Cell. A sparrow flew like an arrow into my cell through the bars on a chilling, desolate midnight. He perched on the parapet wall of the toilet with little jumps, waveringly. I tried to whisper deliriously something to the bird through my half-closed, sleepy and hallucinating eyes. A fat officer giggled with his rocky, grim face hurrying through his midnight rounds behind a bony guard. My gaze flew back to the little creature in my waking dream. Trying to fly out, he narrowly hit a bar and fell to the floor with a sound of susurration, like the moaning of my numb heart. A night train whistled at a faraway station like a ghost of a fallen civilization. Gaining consciousness and courage, the bird walked around the floor of my cell, pecking at tiny spots. The guard returned to the yard, rubbing his tired eyes of surveillance taking long strides up and down. The little bird climbed onto my bed and sat at my painful and trembling feet. I held my breath. Slowly, he started walking on the corners of my bed, moving his eyes this way and that way, as if saying something to me or measuring my heartbeats. An owl outside the high security walls howled a horrible shriek. Perhaps the little one lost his way, or his nest, or his loved one, I thought. Suddenly he fluttered his wings, flying to the ceiling and dashing down to the floor. An ugly siren shrilled. The guards changed their duties. The lifeless night groaned once again. I felt my throat parched, but how could I take water with the bird around in my cell? Slipping back into my distant dream, I whispered to him, "My friend, come every night. I am terribly lonely." Following this up with 2 poems of my own from a series called Habits. Each of the poems in Habits is a conversation with a loved one. Not always peaceful poems, because they're all conversations in one way or the other about the body. The first one, Habits Resistance, is sort of at the intersection of anger and love and pain, with the anger, which should be directed towards the pain, kind of reoriented towards the loved one who is constantly sort of, I guess, making me face and resist. So, yeah. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to write or call or recollect. But out there prowls night, a dapper, demented night. Satin slippers, cloak, visor, the works. Wielding sparkling pain and a moon, a flammable moon in gloved hands set to ignite belly, marrow, muscle, pharynx. Scott synapses in a right cortex, then snipe. Snipe with blithe intent, membranes on the nape of a neck for target practice, and plant thistles between ribs, strafing the refrain, kizas, 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 all along to vanish survivors, language, longing, learning, the ground underfoot. Thought will try and flee to you, sane you, 6,000 miles south to a mound, a metronomed mound, bedclothes and hand-woven dreams, voice wrapped around my absent chest. Hands flexed to draw and transfuse, free breath and will, from 4 superconductive fingers to lungs waterboarded by fire, phlegm, blood, and fear. Old fear, hard to diffuse, and thumb, stroke, stroke, stroking a path away from safety into training camps for shell-shock conscriptees, one where honorable discharge is never an option and deserters detained as long as the sun. 12 billion years of dapper, demented night in satin slippers, with no more your voice, no fingers, for sanity. There are days when I hate you for the endless battle, mine, not yours, that you sustain by reviving breath. I could hate you already for such a tomorrow, where you might not be, to bookend this being. And the second in the series is called Habits Deregulation. It's a visual poem. The thing is, we hadn't met in 15 months. Thing is, you just learnt about say it, say the word. The tumor. Thing is, oh, I was just so glad to see someone from my life. Thing is, I was just so spent, so inexpressibly tired. Thing is, it was a giant relief to shed all pretense of being all right. the thing is, there you were. Thing is, we had not met since Manchester and another premiere, or was it another theatre? One shaped, was it like a horseshoe? Under a constellation of LEDs where a meteor slashed your brow. Thing is, you just learnt about the tumour, and not from me. So there it was, the fearsome word, cancer, ploughing its way through the alphabet, through your ears, the vagus nerves singeing down throat and pharynx and larynx, winding, weaving, gelid fibers over both heart and brain, and knocking sharp consonants on the walls of your stomach. Cancer, expanding to fill eardrum and canal and cochlea. Thing is, I was so glad to see someone from my life, my real life, life where I wasn't only a zero immunity body, a life that was not regulated by chemotherapy and neuropathy and photons and linear accelerators. Thing is, I was so spent. So inexpressibly, totally spent after a row with the radiologist about getting some respite from radiation and the breast braced extra rare. Thing is, it's such a giant relief to shed all pretense of being all right, of being strong, of being stoic. Thing is, we hugged like there was no tomorrow, no pandemic, and no fucking virus. Stood there, stepping in and out of a hug, like a double-stranded base pair of nucleic acids bound. Thing is, we broke the rules, broke the bubble, risked contagion, all for a hug, for that familiar touch. Thing is, in COVID times, I did fret about crushing my mask into your metasternum. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthika. Before we have our next video contributors, I'm just going to read out their biographical information. So first, we're going to hear from Chisom Okafor, who I said earlier was on the advocacy and advisory panel for the anthology. Chisom is a Nigerian poet and clinical nutritionist, presently living in Alabama, where he is an MFA in creative writing candidate and graduate council fellow. His poems, which mostly explore his chronic illness, appear in The Ending Hasn't Happened Yet, an anthology of disabled and neurodivergent poets edited by Hannah Sawyer, and In Between Spaces, an anthology of disabled writers edited by Rebecca Burke. He has received support from the Sundress Academy for the Arts and Commonwealth Foundation. Khairani Barokka is a writer, artist, and editor from Jakarta. Oka's work has been presented widely internationally and centres disability justice as anti-colonial praxis. She's been a UNFPA Indonesian Young Leader Driving Social Change, associate artist at the UK's National Centre for Writing, and a shortlistee for the 2023 Asian Women of Achievement Awards. Her latest books are 2024's Hàn Mặc 9 archers, longlisted for the Jalak Poetry Prize, and her 2025 speculative non-fiction debut, Anna Infinite, was published by Tilted Access Press. Lateef McLeod is a poet, novelist, activist, and scholar. In 2019, he started the podcast Black Disabled Men Talk with co-hosts Leroy Moore, who's also in the anthology, Keith Jones, and Otis Smith. Lateef's books include Studies in Brotherly Love, Prompt Press, 2021, a collaborative ekphrasticatist book, Whispers of Crip Love, Shouts of Crip Revolution, from Poetic Matrix Press in 2020, and A Declaration of a Body of Love. Lateef co-authored Supporting Individuals Who Use Augmentative and Alternative Communication, Plural Publishing, 2022.
Hi, my name is Chisom Okafor. I'm going to be reading a poem titled In Another Life, I Am 22, Gifted and Curious, which was part of the Versus anthology selected by Rachael Boast, and of which I was also in the advisory panel. In another life, I am 22, gifted and curious, and dreaming of fleeing the world while perched on the transom of a stallion of the sea, breathing still evening air off the waterline, and an entanglement of sodium chloride and ancient seaweed. The boy on the other side is waiting, arms outstretched, as though to receive a prodigal, advancing to the interlocking welcome of an embrace. Won by the ways of the sea, I have mastered the art of smearing my sternum with white and green watermarks, and this is the year of my first diagnosis. And I am pressing a miniature paintbrush to my chest, tracing the shape of a heart feeble with cardiomegaly, and whispering the words of the scriptures into it. Talita Kumi, Talita Kumi, feeble girl, rise up, and I am thinking of what happens to the heart when its vessel, an entire body, is immersed in water and left to slouch against the rippling music of immersion. I am thinking of the calculus of bodies, the time between point X and point Y, time between immersion and the bottom of the sea, the exquisite mathematics of drowning.
Hi, my name is Khairani Barokka, and for access description, I am an Indonesian woman with long black hair. I'm wearing red makeup, dangly silver earrings, and a brown and black patterned dress, and behind me is a white curtain and a white wall. I'm going to be reading my poem that is included in Versus very kindly from my book Amok, and it's a poem entitled Tub. What digs you out with a verdigris scalpel, while a powerful blast ignited in their latest attempt to grow lives in the dirt of your online receipt? Human blood carries all kinds of filigree debris, coexisting with the coffin hinges from grotesquely groping eyes panoptic that brought you your morning kettle hiss. Faucet fiddling now, let loose hotness. coldness, piety, lust, bewilderment, supremacy writ into capital, rent hikes for men oiling hair with your rainforests, corners hiding gaspings for breath, a ladybug swatted away by a tank in Gaza, a man with Down syndrome killed with no consequences, violet memories of neuropathic pain still imprinted on your body. You are soaking in a fluid warm enough to let it bleed out, breathe in, deliberately feel the edges of a ghost, the heart already drawn in pencil on your hospital radiator 7 years ago, fuzzy twinges bare on your muscle. Feel these deliberate. You may not bathe in kind water, so lower your head below the surface, part your lips, and scream it.
Hello, I am Dr. Lateef McLeod. I will now recite from my second book of poetry, I Am Too Pretty for Some Ugly Laws. I am too pretty for some ugly laws. I am not supposed to be here in this body, here speaking to you. My mere presence of erratic moving limbs and drooling smile used to be scrubbed off the public pavement. Ugly laws used to be on many U.S. cities' law books, beginning in Chicago in 1867, stating that any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object, or an improper person to be allowed in or on the streets, highways, thoroughfares, or public places in this city, shall not therein or thereon expose himself to public view, under the penalty of $1 for each offense. Any person who looked like me was deemed disgusting and was locked away from the eyes of the upstanding citizens. I am too pretty for some ugly laws, too smooth to be shut in, too smart and eclectic for any box you put me in. My swagger is too bold to be swept up in these public streets. You can stare at me all you want. No cop will bust in my head and carry me away to an institution. No doctor will diagnose me a helpless invalid with an incurable disease. No angry mob with clubs and torches will try to run me out of town. Whatever you do, my roots are rigid like a 100-year-old tree. I will stay right here to glare at your ugly face too.
Absolutely wonderful. Very grateful again to our video contributors for sharing their work with us today. Finally, we have Daniel Sluman. After Daniel's set, we'll invite questions from our audience. Daniel.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and everyone on the live stream as well. It's fantastic. I'm going to read some new poems today. These are poems about chronic pain, and they should be in a collection out next year. Chronic. God whispered in my ear, but the only word I caught was pain. Lord, I have learned to suffer well, to keep silent as the lit nerve stirs my body into mourning, into meaning each morning. Each time it begins like a murmur inside me, gathers itself into a loose gust, pushing the window open. And say I understand the lesson this life has taught me, to know myself to the root of each hair, to cherish this feeling, pale and seized around the suffering I'm drunk on. Well, what kind of surrender is this? Crumpled in the footwell of my father's car as he drives me to the hospital. How do I explain how lucky I am to be the husk this life passes through, like a sweat or splinter, how I hang over myself in bed at night and watch the pain climb inside me whilst I sleep. If there is faith, it is the faith required to keep waking inside this immovable reality, this ache that tells me to love loudly the body on fire. Ceilings. How just as the night sky shifts beyond the minds of the animals outside, the ceilings we are pressed beneath change in aspect and colour. Each evening they drop a little closer to us in rooms that carry us from one year to the next. We float below stains and cracks, lit like reels of stars. My faith in a better reality frayed to a single thread as I scan the cobweb beams in silence and wait for a sign that refuses to drop. Lidocaine bright or yellowed from bowers of smoke, some nights only darkness seems to keep the roof up. Each evening, the quietness wraps a little tighter as we sink into the sheets, eyes dazed shut, our prayers like hands crawling over the drips of faux plaster. How our shirts slip from one colour to the next, and time is always in deficit, catching up or catching on to something half gone, a handful of light learning to spread or seed against the wall. This poem is about medication that my wife uses, which is an immunosuppressant called adalimumab. The smell of hospital disinfectant in your hair and the box of needles shaking in the boot. Each tip of the new medication as sharp, as fragile as the faith that carries the dream of remission into our lives. Having fasted under paper-thin sheets for the last 3 days, you scold your lips on fries. A pool of grease blooms through the paper bag like an exit wound, and the wrappers of our burgers on the dashboard unfasten like the muscles of your thigh that cinch then relax over the bite of that first syringe, emptying a hope that shivers and burns. And this is the last poem I'll read. This is the beautiful that was published in Verses. And if you want to listen to it again, it's also on the last episode of The Verb as well. The beautiful. White sheets contain us in the illusion of containment, and we don't screw like they do on TV. The Vaseline-smeared lens groping bodies that gleam, the carefully placed sighs and glazed eyes of the beautiful swimming through the windows of gyms and pools like torchlight, lonely as hell. They will never love like this, our whole bodies into the earth of each other. We bury ourselves like readers in books, take each other apart and put each other back again and again. Cripples love best because love is an assembly, and we have always been broken, gluing our lives with glitter and card in darkened rooms.
Thank you very much, Lisa, Kartika, and Daniel. So we're open for any questions. Anyone would like to ask us anything individually or about the anthology? Copies are available. anything you'd like to ask.
I'll repeat that for the live stream. So that was about the process of curating and how we went about finding contributors. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. There were. That's a very big question. I'll try and keep the answer fairly concise. There were many factors I wanted to try and balance in the book. I had quite a lot of help doing it, not least from Neil Astley himself, who was very proactive in suggesting various potential contributors to include. And I'm grateful for that. And also, as I said earlier, I appointed an advisory and advocacy panel. I wanted to make sure that the anthology could be as global as possible, as you will have heard a little snippet of that today. And a number of other friends and colleagues also were able to recommend contributors as well. So for me, one of the things I felt was most important was to go about curating the anthology in a way that would reflect healthcare inequalities around the world. I.e., I don't know quite how to put it, but those who normally come last, I put first. Those who usually are used to the privilege of coming first, I put them last. So the anthology is I think the majority of authors are actually South Asian, Southeast Asian authors, as a lot of African writers, many of whom Chisom very kindly introduced me to, and I discussed with him about potential poems we might include. And again, worked very closely with Karthika, which was indispensable. Ajay Saibaba, whose poem we heard earlier. I'm just so glad that we've managed to include his work in the book. And Daniel also was very, very helpfully suggesting those contributors as well. But aside from some of those factors, there's a lot of other things to balance. I wanted to make sure, obviously, if I was going to call it 100 Poems by Deaf, Disabled and Neurodivergent Poets, that there would be a good balance and mixture of those different conditions and situations. There were various particular conditions I was very mindful to include, including very rare diseases or conditions as well. And I was born with a condition called ichthyosis. There's about a dozen different types, but that affects about 1 in every 2 million people. So I'm very, from my own experience, I think I also obviously tapped into my experience of sort of living with this for 50 odd years and having first-hand experience of the different ways that I might be treated or mistreated. And I suppose I came to this book with a wealth of sort of my own experience, but I wasn't entirely confident about doing a whole anthology. So I'm deeply grateful to all those people who have helped. There are a number of poets who Andy Jackson introduced me to as well. Andy, we heard from earlier with his poem Song Not For You. So the Australian contingent, I believe, are pretty chuffed about this, and so am I. It's a pity I can't travel long distance, otherwise I'd go and do a reading with them. I don't want to hog the space. because once I start talking, I tend to carry on. So, if any of you would like to say anything about maybe your observations on the anthology's curation or content, perhaps Karthika and Daniel and Lisa too, if you want to add anything.
Just that I think you were also really mindful about not sticking to an Anglophone world, and there are several translations.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. That was an important aspect as well. There's translations from Arabic, from Hebrew, other languages as well, and of course the French Sign Language was a wonderful piece of work that we enjoyed today.
I was just going to say as well, there's a lot of choices that you made that there could be 100 different books, essentially, in terms of verses. So many people who we couldn't fit in, or people it was difficult to get permissions, or people who didn't quite fit the remit. You know, this is just, it's 100 poems, but it's still a very small selection of a very large world out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, sorry.
Go on,
I was
Lisa.
just, I didn't have anything to do with the editing process, but I just completely admire and love the curation. And I think you have so many different themes, which I think is really, really beautiful. You know, from humour to activism to reflection to injustice. It's all there, a taste. And I really hope it finds a huge audience, and I think it will, because Blood Axe has a good history with doing anthologies very well, and it's triumphed, I think, with this.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So for the live stream people, that was about the individual poets being involved and whether we felt there was pressure or there was interest from us to represent our own experiences in this book.
Yeah, good question. I can't answer that because I only as the editor, but as a contributor, can I hand that question over to?
Yeah, I don't know if there are any other amputee poets in the book. I think there might be one or two more, possibly. But I think the important thing is, and the interesting thing is, you know, Rachael isn't 1 in a million, she's 1 in 2 million, as you just said. My amputation is 1% of all amputations, but the stuff that carries through the whole book is the universal themes and the experiences, the stigmatization, the loneliness, bad medical treatment, or being seen through the kind of lens of medical disability rather than the social model. That's the stuff that comes through more, I think, than that need to kind of be specific about our conditions or how we are in terms of disability.
I think from my own personal perspective, having single-sided deafness, I only speak from my perspective because there's a professor who very illuminatingly said, his name's Professor Adam Shembry, he said it's not about deaf identity, it's deaf identities. And so I just speak for myself, and there's, you know, people who are familiar with deaf identities know that you can talk about being deaf with a capital D, culturally deaf, or deaf if you identify from a medical point of view, and I think there's a flow anyway between those two, and I think for me it's important just to be writing from my own experience, and I'm really happy that seems to be throughout the book, that you can know there's, you feel a strong connection with each poem and a little bit more understanding about the different poets when you read that poem. But I don't feel that there is ever a didactic sense at all in this anthology, which is one of its strengths, one of its many, many strengths.
So if I can add to that, the book isn't only about different conditions. There are a lot of thematic entry points. So one of the things we all talked about was, for instance, satire or, responding to the world, as it were. There's also a lot about love and celebration, because we were very clear that a disabled life is not just a life of misery. It's a rich life, like anyone's life can be. So there were different entry points to that, and the selection of poems was also predicated by things more than conditions or representing a disability or condition. For instance, my poems, which are not the ones that I read today, are part of a renga. So they're a conversation with another poet, Marilyn Hacker, and they were written during the time of COVID. And we had long discussions about Rachel's choice to select those poems in particular, because the idea of community within a disabled or a differently abled world was also one that she wanted to highlight. So there are many ways of reading the book, or diving into the book, or getting something out of the book.
And I think that we've witnessed that today from the material that we've all heard. I just wanted to encourage you. Want to buy the book, have a read of the introduction. I just picked up a little bit in it in terms of talking about the wide contexts of disability. Once you start looking into this, it's a huge subject matter. That's why, as we said earlier, there could be 100 of these anthologies, or maybe not 100, but and I put a note in my introduction just about the broadness of those contexts. So I'll just read this little bit. In the pages of this book, the reader will find acts of resistance, creative vigor, community, warmth, poems which call out the ableist gaze, challenging presumptions and stereotypes, love poems, very important, pain poems, diagnosis or misdiagnosis, poems addressing the coronavirus pandemic, manifestos, humour and satire, self-care, now that's a nice theme to have, acts of witness and solidarity, war poems, that was particularly important, I think, to represent, given that military forces are actually kind of designed to create and indeed weaponize disability. So that had to be broadly covered, and it's very effectively covered by those poets in this anthology. And then we've got poems addressing the impacts of industrial pollution, spill-outs and pollutions causing people to have not just physical health problems and disabilities, but also impacts on mental health. You can't separate your mind from your body. Have a try, but you can't do that. So impacts of industrial pollution and the climate emergency, poems exposing the consequences of colonial legacies, histories of land grabbing, exploitation. So these these aren't all the contexts of disability, but these are some of the ones that you'll find represented within the book. Do we have time for maybe one more question? I've actually lost track of time, and I've no idea how long we've got left.
Do one more.
Huh?
Gentleman there.
Okay. At the back here.
So for the live stream, what are the biggest barriers for deaf and disabled writers or poets in terms of getting into writing or the writing world? Anyone want to start off?
Access. Let's start with the practical stuff.
Yeah.
Getting into a building.
Yeah.
Being given enough time to get into a building. Being asked what your needs are in a way that is non-judgmental and then doesn't compromise those needs, because sometimes you can say what your access needs are. So mine are quite weird. I need like a dozen baths every day. You say that and people think it's a luxury. Oh, no, she doesn't need that. And you turn up at your event space and there's just a crap shower or something. So, getting people to trust you, getting people to work with you. Also, I think what is helpful is if you're doing events, if you even get to the stage of being able to be invited to do events, is being able to develop trust and understanding. But also, I think it's important to have disabled representation within organizations so that we don't have to climb over so many barriers. And then, there's the kind of point of, the problem of actually getting to a place where you have any visibility and are considered to have literary merit to be able to perform in these spaces. And I think, in my experience, that in itself is hard enough, because there's just so little. It's still such a marginalised thing, even though there's so many of us, and I find that really frustrating. I think we need to have more disabled people at the level of representing literature embedded within our institutions, on editorial boards, run, as part of magazine and publishing culture. I mean, there's so many things to say. Any of you want to add to this?
Yeah, access and the understanding, like you said, that there are very many kinds of disability. I mean, to take my own case, in India, I can get deplaned when I have wounds or scars. But the other day I was in Germany and they forced me out of the disabled space because for them, I looked normal. So just the understanding, like Rachel said, that the needs can be really different, and invisible disability is a very real thing. Representation within decisionary bodies would make a huge difference, just for the understanding of what can be a very banal, request for someone who's living with it, but might seem a luxury, like Rachel said, but is really not banal, but vital, really, but, every day, among many things.
I guess I wanted to say that all of these things are social or structural, but the one positive thing is that the other side of that coin is that writing, and I tell this to people who are starting out or people who don't think they have a voice, writing requires really no special instrumentation. You can do it anywhere. And if you're disabled or deaf or chronically ill, you have a story inside you. And that is an incredibly powerful thing that not everyone has. You have that power. The social and the structural stuff is difficult, and we need to constantly be pushing forward to try and change it. I just hope people who are out there who are alone, who are stigmatized, know that they have that potential within them. They have a really powerful story.
Yes, to everything that's been said, and I was having a chat with Daniel earlier about perhaps more representation on people who are choosing winners of prizes or shortlistings, and I think once that happens, it's kind of a ripple effect, and more of it can happen, because if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I'm really happy, for example, tomorrow, the Forward Prizes for poetry, I'm one of the judges. I advocated that British Sign Language, deaf poets should be in the best performed category, single category. And everybody at the forwards was really open to that. And sometimes it just takes making the suggestion. And, you know, Rachel had the idea, you all had this idea for this anthology. And once people read that and see that and are inspired by those poems, and as Daniel said, you know, it's the stories, the individual unique stories that are in you, that is what is interesting. Nobody wants, there's no such thing as a generic good story, is there? So once that, you know, there'll be hopefully another anthology to follow, or other editors will have other ideas from disabled or deaf identity, and so it goes on. You know, you get and across countries as well. You know, so Beauty is a Verb. There was that anthology, and then the anthology that you did, Stares and Whispers. And so, you know, so suddenly, instead of just having, oh, this is a one-off, you actually have a culture. And once you have a culture, you have people who are more interested, they're attracted, and you have people who are like studying and you know, disseminating that knowledge. And suddenly it becomes not, oh, this is just a one-off. It becomes, dare I use the phrase, mainstream.
And you're all part of that here today, which is fantastic, you know.
Did anyone else have a final question?
Okay, so for the live stream, what's something that we would like people to know, one thing that we would like people to know about our situation that might change things or make it easier?
It's a good question.
I have a very stupid one, but it's an everyday issue these days. I'd like people who wear backpacks to know that their bodies don't end with them. Because I just get bruised and blistered all the time because, yeah, someone's got a backpack and they just forget.
Well, I think the invisibility thing that we've touched on quite a lot, and to not make assumptions, and that just to focus on and be open to what other people might be dealing with. And I think that's true from the physical health point of view and the mental health point of view. And one day you can feel okay and the next day not. So that's a kind of spectrum that varies a lot. And I suppose it's just being open to that and sensitive to it in some way.
It would change my life a little bit if parents taught their children about disability. That's something that happens to me a lot. I get interactions with children, and that's absolutely fine. Those interactions with children, they're naturally curious and they're naturally compassionate as well. But I think teaching everyone that bodies come in all shapes and sizes, and there's nothing inherently bad or good about any of that, and we don't have a right to touch other people's bodies, things like that, is really simple. But I think if everybody taught that to their kids, it would make a lot of people's lives easier.
There's a lot of different ways I could answer this. I think one thing that comes to mind is I'd like people to re-educate or for to be taught from quite a young age that beauty is not something to be, in the conventional sense, defining yourself in terms of that it's something that is partially invisible, that there's lots of different ways of thinking about it. There's so much pressure on people, especially young women and girls and boys, to look and dress and design themselves as if they were products. You're not. Beauty is something that's all around us. We walk through it. we are inside it. It is a path. It is a form of instruction. It is a verb. And that would be very meaningful to me if the conversation rapidly changed around that issue. Shall we wrap up? Okay, I'll just a few closing remarks. Thank you all for being part of this event in person, and to our audience on the live stream. Thank you to all our readers and video contributors today. There is an event coming up in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is hosted by Push the Boat Out, and it features Polly Atkin, Pascal Petit and Nuala Watt. That's on Saturday, the 22nd of November at 12:30. And don't forget that next year, Karthika Nair, Daniel Sluman, will be joined by Chisom Okafor and myself for a special event at Stanza International Poetry Festival in St Andrews. That's on Sunday, the 15th of March. Keep an eye on the anthology page on the Blood Axe Books website and their social media for news of more events this year and in 2026, both in the UK and abroad. Thank you for joining us. Do purchase the anthology and help spread the word. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.